almost fresh. There was a tang in it of the sea, and an autumn smell from the flate. Better still, most of the houses were painted, and unlike the tenement, the paint was fresh and bright, and Mitt could see what the pictures were about. He walked slowly, looking at trees and fruit, red swirls and blue flowers, until he came to a particularly fine, tall house, where the painting was in gold as well as other colours. On one gable, a stiff sort of lady in a green dress held out a very purple bunch of grapes to a stiff man on the other gable, whose hair seemed to be solid gold. Mitt much admired them. They reminded him a little of the figureheads on the fronts of the big ships, and perhaps because of the fresh air smell, they made him think of his perfect land. He was standing lost in admiration and daydream when a servant of the merchant who owned the house came out with a stick and told him to be off. He called Mitt a gutter snipe and said he had no business to be there. Mitt ran away, terrified. As he went, he looked back and upwards, and there, on the very top of the hill, was the Earl's palace, larger, whiter, brighter, and with more gold paint than any other house in Holand. Mitt felt it was squashing him. He felt like a pip in a cider press. That was the last time for many years that Mitt remembered his perfect land. Holand quashed it out of his mind entirely and left him simply bewildered. When Mitt's birthday came a few days later, and with it the sea festival, that was bewildering too. Everyone had a holiday, so there were more people about than ever. Mitt watched the festival procession hoisted on to the shoulders of a kindly man called Camden, who seemed to be a friend of his father's. Down the street came a boiling and a bubbling of brightly clothed people. There was terrific shouting and yelling, and ribbons, fruit, and flowers on everyone. Some had silly hats. Images went by on sticks, heads of cows and horses, with hats and ribbons on too. Big boys went tearing in and out of the procession, shouting and swirling wooden rattles. It was noise, noise, noise. Every so often came a group of people playing the traditional tune on traditional instruments. There were pipes called scarnels, which sounded just like their name, and triangular stringed things you played with a horsehair bow. They were cruddles, and they sounded just like their name, too. And the groups of musicians were so far apart from one another that it was only by accident that they played the same part of the tune as the rest. Then, drub, 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 came people, banging at horsehair drums and drowning out even the scarnels. In the midst of it, Mitt glimpsed a straw dummy, fantastically looped with cherry-coloured ribbons, riding along in somebody's arms. "Look," said the kindly Camden, "there's poor old Ammet. That's Earl Had carrying him." "What's he going to do with him?" Mitt asked anxiously. He had never heard of Earl Had doing anything good with anything. "Throw him in the harbour, of course, for luck," explained Camden. Mitt was horrified. Earl Had must be quite heartless. He thought of poor old Ammet being tipped into the harbour just like the bucket of muck Mitt tipped in daily, and poor old Ammet sinking, soaking, drowning, his ribbons getting spoilt. "Don't he float?" he asked tensely. "Not too often," Camden said, quite unaware of Mitt's state of mind. "Mostly he falls to pieces and sinks in the harbour, or just outside it." "He doesn't," Mitt said frantically. There was another friend of Mitt's father's standing beside Camden. He was called Didio, and his face was a mass of tiny lines. Mitt thought Didio's eyes looked like two shiny fish caught in the net of his skin. Didio said, "He doesn't always fall to bits, old Ammet. If the tide's right, he goes out on the tide in one piece, or they say he does, floats for miles, and those in a boat that can find him and pick him out have a lucky boat ever after, they say." If anything, Mitt found it even more distressing to think of poor old Ammet floating.